Good morning, everyone. What a night. Well, look, it's over. Donald J. Trump has won the 2024 presidential election in what he's calling the greatest political movement of all time. And arguably the case, actually. We've seen a lot of changes in numbers across the country as well, and what's looking like a big red shift. This was not just the swing states. We actually saw shifts even within like most states. Even New York, even New Jersey saw, kind of new voters going Republican. This was a pretty monumental night, and one that, hey, the polls did not predict, right? Now, did you all stay up and watch his speech? Of course, I was on with you all for most of it. Let me know your thoughts on Trump's return to the White House in the comments. I'm curious what your thoughts are. I have the chat open today, so right here. I do usually. But folks, first on this historic win, look, the race was called for former President Donald Trump, now President-elect Donald Trump, and it was early this morning. Now you might remember, of course, it was looking like he was going to win last night. You could say it was like, 267. It was looking like almost without a doubt he was going to have it, but you never know these days. That was overcome this morning. He took a new swing state. That put him over the 270 electoral college votes he needs to win. And that last state to come in that, flipped it, that's Wisconsin. Republicans also gained control of the U.S. Senate. And that means, of course, at least they're going to have the Senate, the presidency, and, of course, the Supreme Court. The House of Representatives is actually still unknown, but they might take that too. There's actually a good chance Republicans could also take the House, and if that happens, it's not even a supermajority. That's beyond supermajority. Supermajority would be if you held like the president's office and both chambers of Congress. They also have the Supreme Court technically. This is monumental. I don't think we've seen something like this. Not in our lifetimes, at least. Now let me show you the Electoral College map right now and where things are at. I have it up on my screen right here. You can see actually still 3 states technically, well 4 states technically if you count Maine. It's only 2 Electoral College votes. Michigan is still technically in play, although Trump is leading and it looks like he's going to take it. Arizona is technically in play. Trump is leading by about 100,000 votes and he's projected to take Arizona. Nevada is still in play. Trump's also winning by about 60,000 votes, projected to take it. And actually Alaska too. Trump's leading still by 40,000 votes and projected to take Alaska. Trump basically won or is projected to win every swing state. This is monumental, folks. We're also seeing actually shifts in some other states that could suggest we could see new swing states next time around. That is, if Republicans can maintain this momentum. Virginia was looking pretty close at a few different points. It actually looked like Trump was going to win it at a few points. Ended up not happening. New Jersey as well. New Jersey, actually, it was interesting early voting. It was swinging Republican quite a few times. Of course, where I'm from, at least these days. New Jersey actually was not a major win for Democrats. New Jersey could become, something on the table in future elections. It was interesting as well, Florida. Florida used to be a swing state, as you might remember. Florida, Miami-Dade had just a huge shift. Miami-Dade, where you have a lot of Latino voters, just went like hard Trump. And a lot of people would not have seen that coming, right? They were saying that it looks like Latino voters are turning to Trump. Remember that there were radio stations, right, Spanish language radio stations going up. Soros and his system bought them. And it looked like there was kind of a battle for Latino voters. It seemed that Democrats were kind of hedging their bets on, Trump's, policy to try to deport all the illegal immigrants, that was going to swing them. It actually seemed to have had the opposite effect. A lot of the ones who were eligible to vote seemed to prefer Trump, actually. It's been an interesting shift. I'll dive into some of this as well. Now, as you can see, Trump has taken 277 of the 270 electoral college votes. Major shift here. He's also looked like he's going to take the popular vote. Big shift as well. We will need to wait for the final numbers to come through, especially from California, to see if that's really going to be the case. But if Trump wins the popular vote, it technically doesn't change anything. Like, he's going to win either way at this point, it seems. But that would be big in terms of just what it represents for the country, right? That'd be the first time a Republican could potentially win the popular vote since George W. Bush back in 2004. And this is what's looking like really a historic early high turnout on this, right? Now, back to the Electoral College map and the all-important swing states. Again, it looks like Trump could win them all, every single swing state and Alaska. So far, we have projected Trump as the winner in North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. He's also leading, as of right now, in the remaining battleground states. That's Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada. And Trump declared his victory in a speech late last night, around 2:30 a.m. in the morning. He spoke for about half an hour. I was up pretty late watching it, actually. I'm sure some of you were too. Let me show you what he had to say. Watch this.
America has given us an unprecedented and powerful mandate. We have taken back control of the Senate. Wow, that's good. And the Senate races in Montana, Nevada, Texas, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, were all won by the MAGA movement. They helped so much. Frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country, and maybe beyond. And now it's going to reach a new level of importance because we're going to help our country heal. We're going to help our country heal. We have a country that needs help, and it needs help very badly. We're going to fix our borders. We're going to fix everything about our country.
Now, I know the different takes on this. Some people say, well, Trump promises a lot of things, but last time it didn't happen. I think it's going to be different this time, and here's why. Remember what happened, why a lot of Trump's policies were not implemented in the end, including, finishing building the wall. When Trump came in back in 2016, what was the state? Well, he had technically Republicans had the House and the Senate. Remember, actually, Trump came in back in 2016 to a supermajority. They didn't have the Supreme Court technically, but they still had a supermajority. At the time, though, a lot of Republicans did not really support Trump. And many of them blocked him. There were attempts to remove him. There was the whole Trump-Russia scandal. And of course, that kind of opposition within the Republicans carried on to the midterms. In the midterms, a lot of Republicans who were then kind of ostracized by the party, labeled as rhinos, Republicans in name only, many of them were pushed out. A lot of them did not run for re-election. And what happened? Trump endorsed new candidates, new Republicans who represented a kind of new Republican Party. And given the fact that he did that, what happened? Well, a lot of the old guard Republicans went to the Democrats. That ended up kind of changing the nature of the Democratic Party. The Democrats united with the old Republican Party, the Bush-era Republicans, and Trump came to represent more of like a MAGA party, right? Then you had the rise, of course, of the Freedom Caucus much later, and it seemed that Trump's ideas kind of had reshaped the Republican Party into something new. Some people have suggested that had Trump not won this time, the Republican Party could potentially reverse to like Bush era, but if he wins this time, which he just did, it could solidify this new shift within the Republican Party. And given the fact that the party is very different now from back in 2016, this could mean that Trump could actually implement a lot of what he planned to do. He was blocked again by his own party. He was blocked by scandals, Trump, Russia, and the whole 9 yards, the investigations, the impeachments, and everything else, right? This time around, he's coming in understanding that. This time around, of course, he's not facing opposition within his own party. And this time around, he could be a lot stronger on this. I do think, given this shift that has taken place politically, Trump very likely will implement a lot of what he says he's going to do. And again, the reason he did not do that before is because he was blocked by his own party. And then, of course, the Democrats, came in and blocked him as well. Trump also talked a lot about the border last night and just in general, right? Remember, he stated in his campaign he wants to carry out mass deportations of illegal immigrants. And he also wants to bring the border back under control. Watch this.
We're going to have to seal up those borders, and we're going to have to let people come into our country. We want people to come back in, but we have to let them come back in, but they have to come in legally. They have to come in legally.
Now, what's really interesting with the mass deportation policy is that, while the media has mostly framed it as extreme, right? They frame this as like one of the most extreme things he could possibly do. If you look at polling among voters, mass deportations is even relatively supported among some of the Democrats. It is not as a politically divisive topic as many people initially believed it would be. A lot of people say, well, how is he going to do it? He laid out the plan for it, the Alien and Sedition Act. And of course, the Alien Enemies Act of that, which has been in place since almost the founding of the United States. Something very solid, something that again has been legally challenged through the entire history of the United States and has maintained its legality through that. Trump actually does have a legal pathway to do it, and he found it. On that note, it is interesting that he's saying he's going to create a pathway for people to return to the United States, but they have to come legally. Very likely, I think what's going to happen is they're probably going to finish building the wall, right? They probably will finish it. If you compare the cost of that to the amount of money we're giving to every country around the world, it's not that much by comparison. And also, very likely, there will be stronger migration policies. And also, Trump is threatening, sanctions and tariffs against Mexico if they, allow mass migration through. Mexico actually has been able to hold off some of the waves of the migrant caravans that were coming into the U.S., and a lot of those have been delayed up till now. And so they do have the ability to stop the flow. There is a chance also we could see a return of Trump's Remain in Mexico policy, where people trying to apply for asylum have to wait in Mexico. According to asylum programs, you're supposed to seek asylum in the first safe country you reach. Technically, they're coming up through Latin America. That would be Mexico. And so legally, even by international law, that would be a legally acceptable case. In fact, that would technically be the legal case because you're supposed to apply for amnesty in the first safe country. That would also help alleviate the problem they have of people who are kind of gaming the amnesty system. Those who legitimately are seeking amnesty will still have a path to do it. And again, the difference will be they have to wait in Mexico rather than the United States, right? That's going to be the big difference. On that note as well, the policy ended up not being as divisive among Latinos who are eligible to vote. And I think Democrats really gamed a lot on thinking that was going to be one of the big battleground issues, and it turned out not to be for many people. We will see where this goes. You do have these caravans still heading to the United States. The other side of the argument is also that we've now seen the difference in border policy. Prior to the building of the wall, what was the situation? Well, America had mass illegal immigration. People were coming, they were crossing illegally, and so on. Then Trump built the wall. Then what happened? Well, Democrats came to office and they just began facilitating entry through the wall, leaving the gates open, facilitating it, and so on. Which has left Americans with the impression that mass migration was actually not an illegal immigration issue. It was actually something that was being facilitated or desired by certain people. John Fetterman, of course, in Congress, he actually spoke on Joe Rogan's podcast and talked about this. And during that interview, Joe Rogan kind of pressed him on this. John Fetterman actually said that the purpose of mass illegal immigration is actually to get new voters into swing states and basically solidify a Democrat voting base. What a lot of people have suspected, again, that's John Fetterman, take it for what you will, because he has kind of gone more moderate. He's been leaning more conservative, although I think he's very much still a Democrat. And so that is one of the things people are looking at right now. Also a big shift, Elon Musk, who might actually head up the new Doge department. That's the Department of Government Efficiency. That's going to be coming out as well. And at least Trump is saying he's going to do it. We'll see if it takes shape. But Elon Musk has been a big figure. Elon Musk kind of came out of out of nowhere, I think, for a lot of people, and ended up playing a pretty pivotal role in the election. Again, after buying Twitter and then renaming it X, Elon Musk has taken a pretty strong stand for free speech. Prior to that, Elon Musk was regarded as more like a libertarian. A lot of people didn't think he was really right or left. For Democrats, of course, he was like the electric car guy. And given the fact that they want electric cars, Elon Musk was kind of viewed in light of that. The savior for the green future, kind of. He did come out very strong in favor of Trump. His biggest issues being, of course, Second Amendment rights, the right to bear arms, and of course, free speech. And as soon as Elon Musk bought Twitter, then changed it to X, Elon Musk began facing a lot of political attacks himself, to the extent that Elon Musk said that he believed that if Trump did not get elected, he would go to jail. Personally, I think what Elon Musk was suggesting was probably not prosecuted within the United States, but more likely outside the United States. Because while America has protections on free speech, we have the Constitution, of course, the First Amendment, a lot of other countries do not. In fact, a lot of other countries have laws against certain types of speech, which people who run social media platforms, if they're not censoring in line with those laws, they could be arrested. We've seen this, for example, with the Telegram head. We've seen this, for example, with Brazil going after Elon Musk. We've seen it with France going after Elon Musk. We've seen it with some of the actions carried out in the United Kingdom against various U.S. tech companies. Very likely, that's going to become a battleground as well. And Trump, I think, Biden has not really done it so far. Trump may actually push back against foreign pressure to censor American companies and foreign punishment of American tech companies. This is something, again, that the companies themselves can't really fight against unless they want to go to jail. As we saw, of course, Elon Musk did eventually fold to censorship pressure coming out of Brazil, for example. Something like that could only be dealt with on the presidential level. You would need the President of the United States to push back on that. An individual company working internationally could not do it. We will need to wait and see how Elon's potential role, though, in the government shakes out. But that's going to be big, too. Because if Elon Musk is, in fact, appointed as the new head of government efficiency, this could mean that Elon could replicate what he did to Twitter. He might remember what happened. Elon Musk bought Twitter, and then he fired like 80% of the employees. Some say like 85 or 90%. And after doing that, made Twitter, operating on a much smaller budget, become functional. And, of course, we've seen jumps in user bases. Some are suggesting he could do the same thing with cutting U.S. government spending. In fact, he's suggesting he could cut it by about $2 trillion at least, which would put us within the range of maybe starting to pay off our debt. Now, let me show you this. Trump had to say this about Elon Musk in the early hours this morning. Watch.
Let me tell you, we have a new star. A star is born, Elon. Now he is. Now he's an amazing guy. We were sitting together tonight. He spent 2 weeks in Philadelphia and different parts of Pennsylvania campaigning. But he's a character. He's a special guy. He's a super genius. We have to protect our geniuses. We don't have that many of them.
Now, again, on Elon Musk, his big things are going to be free speech, Second Amendment rights. Elon Musk is probably going to become like the Republican George Soros in terms of the money he has and now his political involvement, because he started now the America PAC, a political action committee. Elon Musk is positioned to do that now, although we'll see what it means, whether he plays a direct role in the government or whether it's like an advisory role. But he is now a political figure. Also interesting with this, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, and a few other people represented kind of a new shift as well. If you remember, Joe Rogan politically was more like a Bernie bro, right? He was like Bernie Sanders supporter, if you go back in time. And a lot of his viewer base on his podcast used to be, more like pot-smoking college kids and stuff like that. Of course, that was one of his parts of his brand. Joe Rogan actually ended up endorsing Donald Trump. And if you understand the kind of move from the middle, right, I'd say the people who are not right or left, you saw this. Joe Rogan, RFK Jr., Elon Musk represented kind of like a third-party shift towards Trump. We'll see if the Republicans are able to hold that, kind of third-party shift, especially with, for example, RFK Jr., who, by the way, is now kind of flagged to head up a new movement they're calling MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, and could potentially also have roles to push for maybe bans on certain vaccines and going against the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, we don't even know what to expect on that, but that could be huge. Pharmaceutical companies are, some of the biggest businesses in the United States. And if you watch a lot of media, pharma ads are some of the big ones. That used to not be legal, by the way. And also, people have pointed out that a lot of food ingredients in the United States are banned in many parts of Europe because of known health problems. When it comes to RFK Jr., he's been talking a lot about these things. And although Trump, and some people criticize him for this, he did do Operation Warp Speed. He fast-tracked the approval of the COVID vaccines. Trump did not seem to support the mandates, but he did fast-track the vaccines. Him partnering with RFK Jr. very likely captured that voter base that did not want those vaccines, even though, again, many criticized Trump for Operation Warp Speed. That's a big shift. And again, that, RFK Jr., whatever your take is, he's kind of like a traditional Democrat. He is the old school moderate Democrat. Interestingly as well, Trump also talked about taxes last night and his plan to reduce taxes. Now, this has been a big point for voters. As I've been talking to people, economy has been one of the biggest issues. And as a whole, in terms of polling, it was still the biggest issue. But let me show you what he had to say on it.
We're going to be paying down debt. We're going to be reducing taxes. We can do things that nobody else can do. Nobody else is going to be able to do it. China doesn't have what we have. Nobody has what we have. But we have the greatest people also. Maybe that's the most important thing.
Now, taxes, paying off the American debt, and also very likely tariffs. These are going to be big issues going forward. Remember that Trump just recently was talking about laws in the late 1800s leading into the early 1900s. Remember that federal income tax was not really a thing until about 1913, although they briefly had it during the Civil War. Briefly had it, got rid of it, and then of course was replaced with tax systems using tariffs, which many people would frame as tax on goods, not tax on income. 1913, same time as the founding of the Federal Reserve, and again the printing of USD, the US dollar, which is a Federal Reserve banknote, not technically American. I mean, flagged as American currency, but technically through a private organization. This could be big. Trump is suggesting that America could maybe get rid of most of its income taxes by using tariffs. And Trump is looking to, again, the laws passed after the Civil War, late 1800s, early 1900s, on that. Now, that being said, some people would say tariffs are technically still taxes. The money has to come from somewhere. And what they technically are is additional fees tacked onto goods. Trump would use foreign tariffs, tariffs on imports, to cover that. And given the fact that America is, technically one of the strongest manufacturers on the face of the planet, America can basically manufacture everything we need domestically and doesn't really need a lot of foreign products technically. That means that foreign companies will have to compete with American prices, unless they do like price fixing, which we'll see how that goes. Meaning, of course, that there is a chance Trump could get rid of a lot of income tax. That's not to say we won't see income tax at the, again, state level, but it is possible. The other side of it, of course, combine that with Elon Musk saying he's planning to cut U.S. government spending by at least $2 trillion. It is possible they could clear enough to begin seriously paying off American debt. And as they begin paying off the debt, that also means, of course, less when it comes to interest rates on debt. And if you understand that America right now is paying about the equivalent of our defense budget just on, again, debt, that's big. That frees up a lot of tax dollars. That would be a huge move. Although, given the fact that we're massively in debt, last I checked over $30 trillion, this would take a long time. I don't know if Trump could do that even in his lifetime, but he could set the ball rolling towards it. Trump also gave his thoughts, notably, on coming this far, especially after facing 2 alleged assassination attempts. Let me show you this. Watch.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness.
Now, on the assassination attempts, you might remember the first time an individual actually fired multiple shots at Trump. Some say, based on bullet trajectory, that Trump turning his head at the last minute probably saved his life. Again, the bullet hit his ear rather than his skull, which it would have if he had not turned his head, and did actually kill one supporter behind him during that rally. It was a terrible incident. The individual, of course, who fired the shot was killed, I believe, by police technically, or at least police first returned fire, and then, of course, Secret Service returned with their counter sniper team. The second assassination attempt, allegedly, because again, it's still going through court, innocent till proven guilty, folks, was on, of course, the golf green in Florida. And a Secret Service agent just happened to see a gun sticking out of the bushes and managed to open fire on the individual after the gun turned toward the Secret Service agent. That resulted in a foot pursuit, later a vehicle pursuit. They arrested the individual. But look, if that one Secret Service agent had not seen that gun, or just didn't do anything about it, Trump may not be with us right now. That could have been the end of it. Both of these were very close calls. Now, of course, whether you think that was an act of God or an act of luck is more of a religious issue. So, you be the judge of that. Tell me what you all think in the comments on that. But really, it was a close call on both counts. And heck, we'll see where things go from here. The Secret Service actually did send additional, I was reading at least, additional protection to Trump after it seemed that he was basically the winner late last night. And given that, Trump does have what seems to be now presidential level protection, which he was asking Biden to give him, although again, he already had the Secret Service protection both of a former president and of a leading presidential candidate. But in terms of actual presidents, they get a lot more. And Trump's been noting that given the fact that Iran has allegedly been making assassination threats against Trump, that he needs that level of presidential protection, which deals with those types of international threats. It seems that Trump now has that. Now, let's also take a deep dive into the numbers of Trump's win. Now, first off, there was very high voter turnout. Epoch Times noted this. They say voter turnout in the 2018, 2020, and 22 elections was among the highest in U.S. history, with roughly 66% of the nation's voting eligible population voting in 2020. And it's according to Pew Research Center. And it's based on some early estimates, particularly in Michigan and Georgia, turnout this year may exceed what the nation saw in 2020. And it's that while official turnout data will not be available until all counties in each state finalize their election results, counting is still going on in many places. Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger said early on Election Day that based on early voting numbers, the Peach State, and again Georgia, would likely surpass 2020 turnout by the time polls close that evening. Now, Raffensperger said expected more than 5 million total votes, outpacing the state's numbers for 4 years prior when just under 5 million voted in the presidential election. Remember, Georgia was pretty close back in 2020. Biden won by like 11,000 votes. Now, it notes as well that nearly 7 million ballots were cast in Pennsylvania in 2020. By Wednesday morning, when 96% of the ballots were tallied in the state right now, the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, had nearly reached the same threshold, and there's more still coming in. Now, it wasn't just high voter turnout either. Exit polls were showing big demographic shifts for Trump. Trump's numbers have gone up in many demographics. I'll be talking about this, though, after I come back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. Donald J. Trump is set to make a historic return to the White House. And look, his win was fueled by high voter turnout and his numbers swinging up in many key demographics. A lot of people, I think, never saw this coming. Now, Epoch Times said this. They say national and swing state exit polling results on Election Day showed Trump made substantial gains among Latino voters, both nationally and notably in swing states. And it's in the National Election Pool exit polls conducted by Edison Research on November 5th, Trump made key gains with the minority group that makes up at least 13% of the American electorate. And among respondents who identify themselves as Latinos, 53% of respondents said they voted for Harris and 45% said they voted for Trump. Now, some people would say, well, that's still not the majority, but it's a shift. It's a big shift. Now, that is a 13 percentage point improvement over Trump's performance within the group in 2020 when he ran against President Joe Biden. A big shift. Notably as well, just some notes here, on the Latino community. Trump became the first Republican candidate to win the county, I believe, Dade, Miami-Dade, in 36 years. That's huge, folks. Again, remember, Florida used to be a swing state. Now, you could say, well, Cubans, they're anti-communist for the most part, the ones here. Maybe it was them. Cubans typically always voted mostly Republican. Not all of them, of course, but given the fact that a lot of them escaped Fidel Castro, they tend to be more Republican voters. The shift in Miami-Dade may not have been them. The shift was probably from other Latino voters, and that's what's being credited to, in fact. The last Republican to win Miami-Dade was George H.W. Bush back in 1988. So let that sink in just how big that is. And of course, we saw similar gains with Trump across the nation. You're looking at about 10%, maybe 10,000 gain in a lot of states where people didn't think would ever change, frankly. And so I think there's going to be a lot of analysis on where those votes actually came from, which groups. But Trump did seem to move a lot of people from the left, a lot of people who people didn't think would vote for him. Trump seems to have won many over. Trump also saw, it says here, according to Epoch Times, significant improvements with Latino voters in the battleground states. In Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, he improved his performance with Latino voters by at least 10 percentage points over 2020. In Nevada, a state where 1/3 of the population identifies as Latino, Trump tied with Harris among Latino voters. And according to the responses given to pollsters and the exits, both candidates received 47% of the Latino vote. That's huge, folks. Now, remember, it doesn't have to necessarily be a majority to be a big deal. We saw this, of course, with Trump winning over a lot of people who tend to vote more Democrat. The demographic shifts have been big. And remember, that's despite the fact of all the labels against Trump, trying to frame him as, racist and all these other things. It's not resonating with people the way that many, maybe, opposition researchers maybe thought it would. We also saw a lot of voter turnout from Amish people. And especially when it comes to Pennsylvania, they might have actually played a real role in flipping Pennsylvania. Amish voters. And you're looking at a pretty good Amish population. Also, New Jersey, a few other states, they have Amish. They have a lot of Amish. They could actually become some of the big political players in this country as well. Now, Amish used to not be known to be big voters. So this is also a big shift. And again, especially when it comes to Pennsylvania, that is huge. And remember what happened to a lot of Amish people. Many of them were saying that they were forced to get vaccines, but didn't want them, or at least were, trying to be forced to. Many of them noted, for example, that because of different land policies, they were losing their farms or their cows and things like that, or raw milk. And so many of them felt that they were being inhibited from living the life that they want to live. And probably because of that, some of them came out to vote in ways we probably would not have seen them vote before. That's a new big voter base. Now, let's do a recap on what led to the main narratives people went with going into the polls. Now, this is important to me because, look, when it comes to what the media says is a big deal, that does not always reflect what voters think is a big deal. If you watched me last night, I said this on camera. When it comes to the media, right, they're calling names and they're saying Trump is this name and that name. And for voters, at least for Trump voters, a lot of that's not the experience. A lot of them believe they've been victimized by the very same things that the other side is accusing them of. They believe that the other side has done the same thing to them that they're accusing them of, many of them. Now, look, on the Democrat side, when it comes to narratives, the main ones against Trump were January 6th, the various criminal charges, and the Nazi or fascist label. Those were the main things Democrats focused on. That and, of course, abortion and that type of stuff. Now, when it came to January 6th, it is possible that flipped a few potential Trump voters, although maybe they flipped back. The criminal charges seem to have had the opposite result in many cases. In fact, many people would say, including, for example, Ron DeSantis in Florida when he was running for president, that when Trump was criminally charged, it kind of sucked the oxygen out of the room of the Republican elections for their nominee, and everything just focused on Trump. The criminal charges may have actually flipped it, and the criminal charges were contrasted with January 6th. They may have had the opposite result. The Nazi and fascist labels, those were things that Democrats were saying against Trump going back to 2016. And one thing I mentioned, if you want to make opposition arguments, if you want to label somebody or tear somebody down, you need to set your middle ground, right? If your volume is full blast, if the average thing you say is the most extreme thing you can come up with, that means your middle ground is at technically the highest point. That means, think of it like if you're doing photography. This is how I think of it. If you're doing photography and you set your white balance, like you define gray as pure black or pure white, what's going to happen? None of your photos are going to turn out because you falsely set the middle. If you make your middle an extreme, nothing below that is going to have any effect. Nothing below that is going to be heard by anybody. Nobody's going to care about it because your middle ground is more extreme than that. And with Trump, I personally believe that's what we saw happen. They had the Nazi label. They accused him of sexual allegations, everything you can think of. And because the volume was set at full blast mostly for the last 8 years, it didn't seem to change voters. You could say, of course, what the media wants to say. The big question is, will it change how people vote? Now, on the Democrat side also, they put a lot of their bets on celebrities. Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, they had concerts with Kamala Harris. Kamala was on Saturday Night Live. A lot of the Hollywood establishment was on her side. A lot of the entertainment establishment was on her side. Trump, for the most part, did not have the media, Hollywood, or many of the music stars, although he did get MMA. He did get, of course, a lot of online influencers, Jake Paul, for example, some of the more Gen Z type ones who, actually Barron Trump helped bring in a few of them. That was kind of the divide. Trump, in other words, was focused on winning people he didn't have before. And that might have been big. We talked about some of the shifts we saw in states that are normally solid blue. Even ones that, Kamala still won, like New York, for example, where you actually did see a lot more voters come out for Trump. Some people may suggest that was new voting bases. Some may believe that maybe it's because he had rallies here. Maybe that turned some voters. But he was focused on new voting bases, not just old ones. Now, on Trump's side, look, when it comes to name calling, let's be honest, Trump also said a lot of pretty rough things about the Democrats. They both call each other names. Let's be honest with ourselves. They both do it. Now, on Trump's side, a lot of that was around accusations of corruption, two-tier justice, irresponsible spending. Those were the big narratives. The big narratives going into election day, though, right? When you think about what narratives are people hearing about as they go to vote at the polls, what were they on Trump's side? Well, it wasn't Lady Gaga and things like that, although he did get the endorsement of Joe Rogan. He did get, of course, the endorsement of a few online influencers, Jake Paul, for example, and again, Elon Musk, who was already kind of with him, right? He did get kind of people who were more historically either non-politically active or in the middle. There was also the fry cooking photo at McDonald's, after which McDonald's was very much attacked for letting him do that, although they did offer Kamala Harris the same thing. The photo of Donald Trump cooking fries at McDonald's, according to reports, Google actually contacted Trump and said, like, it was like historic traffic, allegedly, right? Joe Rogan's interview with Trump, last I checked, had like 30 million views. It was tens of millions at least. I don't know what the latest numbers on that were. Joe Rogan also offered to have Kamala Harris on. He alleges that they had certain terms for the interview that he wouldn't agree to, and she ended up not doing it. He also, again, had on J.D. Vance, Trump's VP pick, who now, again, is the VP-elect. And, he didn't really see them on the other side. And so that Joe Rogan interview probably also flipped some voters. Remember, Joe Rogan, although he's now regarded as conservative, he was a Bernie bro. Joe Rogan's viewer base used to be like Bernie Sanders supporters. Definitely not your normal Republicans, right? And of course, the using of Biden suggesting Trump supporters were garbage, that was a big one. It seemed that Democrats kind of hedged a lot of their bets on saying that Trump said Puerto Rico is a floating pile of garbage. Trump did not say that. That was a comedian joking about it. And it seems even among Puerto Ricans that did not resonate, because actually Republicans saw wins even in Puerto Rico. And then Biden, of course, came out and suggested the only garbage around here were his supporters. And then there was a big scandal because the White House was accused of altering the transcripts on that. And then, of course, right after that, what did Trump do? He got a garbage truck dressed like a garbage worker and then drove the garbage truck to his campaign event. He used it. Trump's very good at that kind of stuff. Now, there was also the New York incident where officials, 7 government agencies, killed Peanut the squirrel. We may never know whether Peanut the squirrel and that incident swung voters to Trump, but that was an internet sensation on par with the whole cat eating thing in terms of the memes and in terms of the funny pictures and in terms of rallying the base to go out to vote. People were posting memes of like Lord of the Rings where Aragorn is running into the gates of Mordor, but he's saying for Peanut. You know what I mean? That was kind of the meme element of rallying the voter base. So Peanut the squirrel, again, we may never know how many people were squirrel voters, but Peanut was one of the big narratives. Trump was also holding ongoing large-scale events, including at Madison Square Garden in New York. A lot of people never thought that Trump would actually hold events in New York. Ironically, it seems that Trump began campaigning in New York and in some areas that he normally wouldn't, like New Jersey, for example, because of the criminal charges. He was stuck here. And again, on that note, it is possible the criminal charges may have actually played the role of helping him win, because the judges in some cases would not let him, not show up to court. He had to stay in New York. He had to be around the tri-state area. And so he held events that he probably would not have held otherwise. Again, including in New York, in the Bronx, right here in Manhattan, including, for example, again, in New Jersey, where he probably would have never bothered to campaign before. That, of course, we may never know the actual effect of that, but it seems to have made a difference, actually. Now, on the other side of the legal attacks also, because remember, they're saying Trump's a felon and everything else. Take it for what you will. These also had the effect of keeping him in the news cycle. And that was one of the criticisms actually from Ron DeSantis when Ron DeSantis was trying to run for president. Ron DeSantis noted he was leading in the polls until the criminal charges against Trump came out when they raided Mar-a-Lago. That shifted things, and all the cameras went from Ron DeSantis and the other candidates to Trump. It shifted the entire national focus. Now, of course, the main thing with narratives and events, though, is whether they can actually rally a voting base to go to the polls. Some would suggest that, again, the rally took place on the belief that Americans were being attacked and Trump was being attacked, and Trump's narrative was, I am your retribution. Trump's narrative was, they're not coming for me, they're going for you, but I'm just in the way. And so Trump had a way of using these attacks as a way to frame a political narrative. And also, again, some people would say that the assassination attempt also rallied Trump's base. I personally know some people who were Trump supporters who did not want to be public Trump supporters who changed after the assassination attempts. They said, game's on, we're not going to hide anymore. And it is possible that rallied his base enough to get them out to vote. Now, on the Kamala side, I don't know what she did that might have rallied the base. Some of the big concerts she was holding could have had that effect, but again, we don't really know. There was also the big issue with early voting and other things, right? Leading up to the elections, it did seem Kamala Harris was doing particularly well with women. Trump was winning new voters among Latinos, Black Americans, young men. Even a lot of the Jewish voting base was shifting towards Trump, which, they historically vote more Democrat, but because of Israel-Gaza, that was a big thing. Trump also potentially got some of the independent voters, again, from his work with RFK Jr., a more historical moderate Democrat. Joe Rogan, who used to be kind of more like Democrat socialists like Bernie Sanders, and Elon Musk, who used to not be politically active at all. Now, of course, there's also the all-around issue of what people actually care about, right? You can say everything in the book. You can have every news outlet, parroting every narrative under the sun. But when it comes to voting, the big issue is whether it actually resonates with voters and whether they're going to care enough to vote on it. When I was talking to people in Georgia, for example, just recently, a lot of the women very much did care about abortion. For a lot of women voters, that's one of the big issues. The overall issue for people, though, was the economy. And a lot of people I talked to, even if they don't like other elements of Trump, they're like, well, life was better under him, and I can put everything else aside because my life is more difficult. Economy was one of the biggest issues, including by polling. A lot of people believe their lives have become more difficult over the last few years. Groceries are more expensive. And folks, it's exactly what I've been saying on this show. What did I say? If you read a lot of the mainstream media, if you read a lot of the big corporate media, what have they been saying? They're like, well, the economy is doing great. The stocks are up. Americans, why do they not understand how great the economy is? And I've mentioned, why do people care about the economy? They care about the economy because the economy affects their well-being. And just because big businesses are doing well does not mean the voters are doing well. There was a discrepancy in the economy. Yes, the stock market's doing great. Good. The US dollar is doing decent compared to other countries. You could argue this, so they might point to the debt and other things that are kind of creating a time bomb, frankly. But the big question is, what is the experience of the average voter? And do the profit margins in the big companies actually reflect in the well-being of the average person? A lot of people, in terms of changes they wanted things that affect their living situations. And for a lot of people, their lives have become more difficult. Things have become more expensive. Cost of living is going up. Rents are more expensive. Groceries are more expensive. Gas is more expensive. And for them, that's what they care about. And we saw it on Election Day. Also, with Election Day technically behind us as well, this probably will not be the end. We are probably going to still watch protests, legal challenges, other ongoing issues. I can tell you, going into last night, I did not believe we would see the decision come out because Nevada and Arizona, they were basically saying they need a few days to count the votes. And what ended up happening was Trump won Pennsylvania, and then Trump won Michigan. Trump won states that were determined last night that he was not projected to possibly maybe win, right? Those were kind of outliers on the possibility. A lot of people thought it was going to come down to Arizona. And yes, Pennsylvania was a big one there, but Trump ended up winning them. And so, whereas a lot of people, including myself, actually believed that we probably would not get the answers on who won the election by today, he did it. And that being said, though, we probably will still see some challenges. There's probably some pressure on the Electoral College. It's not clear whether Democrats will do this time. Now, look, I know this has been politicized. During the 2020 elections, Trump had dueling electors for the Electoral College, as you might remember. And many of them are being criminally charged right now for doing that, even though it's debatable historically whether it's legal or not, because it has happened before and it was deemed legal. The other side, though, is you remember back in 2016, Democrats tried threatening and pressuring members of the Electoral College to flip their vote, to change their vote, something that's actually illegal for them to do in many cases. And many members of the Electoral College reported they were having death threats. Now, the big question going into this time is whether Democrats will try that again, because they did it back in 2016. And again, if they try it now, it's going to conflict with the whole narrative of Trump trying to overthrow democracy, of Trump trying to overthrow the Constitution and launch an insurrection. Because if they do that now, as they did in 2016, many people will frame it like that, right? And again, January 6th, threat against democracy, these kinds of things, that was one of the big rallying calls among Democrat voters. It's not clear whether they're going to try it again, but we will see. There's also the big question also of whether we'll see something similar to the January 6th protests. Remember, leading from now until January 6th, when the Electoral College votes will be counted, there's a lot of unknowns. And between January 6th and January 20th, when the inauguration takes place, there's also going to be a lot of things we don't know. Now, some people would say that the way that Electoral College votes are counted, as we saw on January 6th, of course, they have to bring up the Electoral College votes, they count them, and of course, the vice president, who's going to be Kamala Harris this time, is the one who has to do that. Now, you might remember back in 2020 when Biden won, right? And again, you had the January 6th protests. What happened? Well, some people suggested that Trump tried pressuring Vice President Mike Pence at the time to maybe stall things or say that they couldn't decide which Electoral College votes to count, or maybe to count the dueling elector votes, or maybe bring this to like a vote by Congress, right? Or like, that kind of thing. Now, some people would say that's still a possibility, but it's actually not. And this is important because what happened after January 6th? They passed a new law where they made it so the vice president cannot overturn the results. They made it so the vice president has to basically accept things, and it's just like a job they just have to go through the motions of. The vice president does not have the power to change things anymore. Now, Democrats argue they didn't have power to change it before either. A lot of Republicans said, well, if you didn't have power to change it before either, then why did you change the law to make it so you couldn't do it? The important thing going in this time, though, is that because they did change the law, Kamala Harris will not have that power. Meaning, of course, January 6th will be less consequential this time, depending, again, how things go with the Electoral College. That's a huge shift. And even if it does go to a vote by state, where, again, every state gets one vote, one representative, because Republicans do control the legislature, the state level, they would have more votes anyways. And so that might not be a winning proposal for them either. Now, look, it is likely things are not going to really quiet down, I would say, until the presidential inauguration on January 20th. But again, we will have to see, because I don't think a lot of people thought this would happen. Democrats lost a lot of support, and they're facing a potential, not even a supermajority, a beyond supermajority, where it's possible the Republicans, right now, Republicans are probably going to take the presidency, take the Senate, and they technically, depending on how you weigh it, right, technically have the Supreme Court. They could also win the House of Representatives. and they're projected to win the House of Representatives on the current trajectory. They might not, but they may. And again, if that happens, given the fact that a lot of voters switched their votes, a lot of people switched parties, this is kind of a moment of maybe looking inward for some people. It's a big shift that a lot of people do not see coming. And again, as I was saying, maybe the reason is because a lot of people who were being polled would not say who they were voting for. A lot of Republicans at the exit polls would not say they're voting for Trump. And I said the reason for that is because they don't want to be attacked. Politically, they were the ones being targeted, they were the ones being labeled, they were the ones being called Nazis and fascists and everything like that. And a lot of them were not willing to talk to media. A lot of them did not want to talk about who they were voting for. I encountered this personally when I was talking to voters in Georgia. The Trump supporters were the ones who were more hesitant to say who they're voting for. So folks, massive day. Let's jump into some questions. And I went a bit longer today because it's a big day. Let's see, Kathleen White, you're saying billboards need to post the true definition of democracy. They need to post the true definition of what America is, where America is not a democracy. America is a constitutional republic. A republic is representative democracy where we elect people to represent us in the democratic process, not direct democracy. Direct democracy would basically be mob rule. And in addition to that, we are a constitutional republic, meaning we have a system of law that cannot be overturned even through mob rule. And so even if you get 100 people in a room and they say they want to commit a crime or do something else, even if every one of them votes for it, right? The will of the people, democracy wins. There's laws to prevent them from carrying it out. You have the Bill of Rights, you have different standards in the way the government functions, and those things cannot be overturned. That's the difference between the United States as a constitutional republic and what many say is a democracy. We are not a democracy. Yes, we have a democratic system. Yes, we have systems of democracy. But the process we have through that is representative democracy protected with a constitution, which is different. I actually did a special feature on this if anyone wants to see it, which is called Rewriting. It's called America Rewritten, where I talk about the Founding Fathers and their comments on democracy and a republic and why they chose to make us a republic and not a democracy. It's history I think most people should know. And F, you're saying all the memes with Trump and with dogs, cats, squirrels, raccoons. In reality, he has no pets. That's interesting. Yeah, I forgot about that. I think Trump is, as far as I know, the first president who did not have the presidential dog, right? Wasn't he the first president to not have a presidential dog? Or at least the first one in our lifetimes. That is interesting, actually. Hey, maybe he'll get a squirrel. Maybe he'll get a squirrel now. Who knows? Let's see. ID Grillo, you're saying, can they still contest the election when they go through the electors? I heard last time there were over 18 states that wanted to check on the suspicious activities. There very likely will be some legal challenges. There were bomb threats in Georgia, for example. There were allegations. Some of the bomb threats were coming from other countries like Russia. If Georgia flipped, who knows, depending on how the rest of the swing states go, it could put things in kind of, it could be debatably either way still. In terms of people challenging the elections, though, and wanting reviews of maybe illegal votes or things like that, typically Republicans are the ones pushing for that, not Democrats. You might see some calls for recounts in some of the closer races. Again, as I mentioned, you probably will see challenges to the election results still. But in terms of the way things have been going with that tends to lean more in favor of Republicans, not Democrats. So we'll see how it goes with that and whether they choose to do it still. And a few big differences this time around is that, of course, you had Laura Trump had a very strong election integrity system where if Republican poll watchers were blocked, which they were, there were Republican poll watchers blocked from watching the polls. Immediately, it was reported. Immediately, they filed lawsuits, and almost immediately, within 20 minutes in some cases or something like that, they were allowed in. And so a lot of the efforts to block poll watchers, a lot of the efforts to do other funny business was very rapidly reported and blocked. Elon Musk also had a reporting system, including a fact-checking system, watching for things like this all across the country. And James O'Keefe, with formerly Project Veritas, he now does OMG, O'Keefe Media Group. He was also saying that he had equipped many people in different areas with hidden cameras. And he suggests, of course, he only did this in areas where it's legally to have surreptitious reporting or recording, meaning people would not have two-party consent, right? One-party consent, meaning that if you're the one recording, it's okay as long as you want to do it, basically. And in states, notably, that allow recording within polling stations. Although he did say that even if people surreptitiously record, undercover recording, that he could legally publish it still. And he was getting some pushback on that. But I do believe that probably put a lot of pressure on people who may have considered doing things, doing some funny business, let's say, where they came to realize that they would probably they'd risk being exposed were they to do anything like that. You also have, of course, the local election lawsuits, including, for example, Texas, raising a flag over more than 400,000 registered voters and questioning whether these people are legal or not, and actually asking the federal government to review them. Those lawsuits could actually still be in play, and if people are found to be illegally registered, remember, within 90 days you can't purge them from the voter rolls, but that can happen now. And so there probably will be some reviews on this. I don't think by any means we're going to see the end of this anytime soon. On Trump also, on pets from a 2019 speech, I have it here. ABC News, Trump said, they said this, President Trump says he would feel a little phony having a dog. And it said, do you love your dogs? You do love your dogs, don't you? He said to the crowd. I wouldn't mind having one, honestly, but I don't have any time. Then he paused to shake his head. I don't know. Feels a little phony to me. A lot of people say, oh, you should get a dog. Why? It's good politically, I said. Look, that's not the relationship I have with my people. We'll see. It seems Trump's not too into getting a dog. Maybe like Barron Trump wants a dog. Who knows? They might do it. Understandably, too, because he was dealing with quite a bit, and maybe caring for a dog was not at the top of his list of priorities. Remember, they had the whole Trump-Russia scandal and tried to impeach him. Well, they did vote to twice. He was dealing with kind of a lot, so maybe having a dog was just not high enough on his list of priorities. Maybe, right? Sally Sabat, you're saying, in the first 100 days, how many executive orders do you think will be passed to streamline the process and bank on the promises made / promises kept to avoid House votes? We'll see. One of the big questions will be whether Republicans actually take the House. If Republicans manage to take the House of Representatives in addition to the Senate and in addition to technically having the Supreme Court, Trump may not need to use executive orders. President Barack Obama kind of established the precedent of using executive orders to bypass Congress. Because when Barack Obama was in his second term in office, you might remember, Republicans had both the House and the Senate. And so he would have been a lame duck president. He bypassed that by doing executive orders. It was legally questionable. But legally questionable or not, he did establish a precedent to do that, where he does it, it's law, and it has to go through like a 10-year legal process to see whether it's legal or not because of the way the system works, meaning things stay in place for a very long time. Would Trump do that? He might. Although he has not shown signs that he would do that, he might. He did say that day one, he's going to carry out his actions to carry out mass deportations. He probably will not need Congress to do that unless the technicality is whether he needs a declaration of war, right? If you go by the Enemy Sedition Act. The Alien Sedition Act, right? He might need an act of war for that, which would require Congress, but it's not clear whether he's going to do that or how he's going to do it. But he does have the legal pathway to do it, so we will see. That being said, I think America technically they have several wars technically against random things like, global warming and stuff, so maybe he can use it for some of that stuff, who knows? There are a lot of legal options he has, and he might do it. And on the note of the dog too, yeah, Trump basically said he doesn't want to get a dog just for politics. That was really what he kind of suggested, right? Christ brings a sword. You're saying tolerance has gone too far to the left. Well, I'm a big fan of tolerance. Tolerance to me has a different meaning than the way a lot of people use it, though. I believe that what tolerance has become for many people is actually intolerance, where they want other people to be tolerant of their intolerance. And some people want acceptance, not tolerance. There's a difference, for example, with some things, like people who say, I wish you would be more tolerant. They're saying that they want you to accept their values or their beliefs. Whereas my understanding of tolerance means that you let people have their freedom, but it doesn't mean that you alter your own values in doing so. There's a lot of things I tolerate that I don't support. I actually believe that's one of the foundations of freedom, right? Freedom and believing in freedom means that you allow the freedom of others. It doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they say, but you tolerate it. To me, that's tolerance. It's not acceptance, right? You're tolerating it, not accepting it. And I think actually tolerance would probably help this country if we learn to tolerate the differences between individuals while maintaining our own standards. It does not mean you have to accept what they say. It does not mean you have to accept their values, but we tolerate each other, right? Like a family at a dinner and you have your crazy uncle. You might tolerate him. Doesn't mean you agree with him, but you might tolerate him, right? He's your crazy uncle, but you love him. Turning the other cheek, to me, that's tolerance also. Let's see, California gal, you're saying, do you think Trump can turn around the federal debt, or is it too big to fix? When it comes to debt and the economy, frankly, I believe that the dam has been artificially supported to prevent economic downturn when it's almost inevitable. I think it's going to be very hard for Trump to hold back that. I do think economic downturn is almost going to happen without a doubt, and I don't believe anybody could stop it. The level of debt we're facing, a lot of the international issues when it comes to Russia and China especially, those things can have a huge impact. I'll tell you right now, unless Europe can decouple enough from the Russian economy, and they've been trying to, if the Russian economy collapses, it will also affect the economies all throughout Europe. Unless other countries, including the United States, can properly decouple economically from China, if and when the Chinese economy collapses, it will probably collapse the economies of a lot of other countries too, because of the way they're intertwined. I believe a lot of people see the writing on the wall, and I believe that's why they've been using the narrative of de-risking, right? They're getting rid of the risk of being connected to it when it collapses, because all the writing on the wall shows their economies are going to collapse. The other issue is, of course, when it comes to debt and countries holding American debt, because some have also suggested that as a kind of trade weapon, some countries could just sell it all off as fast as they could. I don't know what the impact of that would be. But Trump coming in here is probably going to inherit a very difficult economic situation. And again, you have to understand, because the USD, the US dollar, is the world reserve currency, and because America is technically the world leader, even though we may not think of ourselves like that. What happens around the world is going to impact us, and what happens here impacts the world. And so we will see how the global economy deals with this. I believe that the sending around of money has artificially propped a lot of things up, and it's going to be questionable whether that's sustainable, because I don't know if it is. It is possible Trump could inherit a very, almost impossible to fix economy, and it's going to be a long, hard road building up from it, but I do think American manufacturing, tariffs, and other things probably can build back from it. I'm relatively confident it's not going to hit as hard here, but we'll see. Especially with the housing, actually, especially if he deports 30 million people. We'll probably see housing prices drop quite a bit, by the way. David Johnson, you're saying the Constitution of the United States is for a moral and religious people. In the hands of any other, it is of no use. John Adams. And I like that quote as well. It is true that freedom is also based on morality. You cannot have freedom without morality. You cannot have stable freedom without morality. Freedom without morality is chaos. Freedom with morality is hopefully what we're building here. Freedom requires an individual to have self-restraint and to have their own moral values and to take responsibility for themselves. If you remove those factors and you grant total freedom, you're going to have a lot of irresponsible people doing a lot of bad things. So I fully believe that alongside the creation of freedom, you also need to have a strong legal system, first off, that maybe has punishments in place, consequences for bad behavior, which does work as a deterrent for bad behavior. But you also need to have people working on themselves. I do think you not only need to have a political revolution, you need to have a moral revolution in order to build things back properly, personally. And you know, have your own values, folks. I'm not preaching anything in particular here. You know, whatever you think that is. D.R. Lane, you're saying tolerance is a good thing and you don't have to agree. But forcing that tolerance into your own life and space is no longer tolerance. It's tyranny. And I'd agree. Actually, I very much believe in the principles of tolerance. In fact, it's one of the pillars of my personal faith, right? I believe in being kind and honest and tolerant. Those are the foundations of what I build my character on, or at least try to. I believe that tolerance has been mislabeled. And what a lot of people call tolerance is actually intolerance. It is tyranny, as you mentioned, and force. You can't force people to adopt your morals. You know, that's the other side of the moral argument, actually. I believe that if you try to force people to have your values, not only will they not do it, but it might have the opposite effect. I don't think coercion is an effective way to make people align with an ideology or a moral system or whatever. And I believe that over the past 4 years, maybe longer than that, Americans have been, you know, have been the victims of severe intolerance with people trying to shove these, you know, woke policies down their throats, frankly. At least that's how a lot of people feel. The trans movement, a lot of the race movements, which demonized white people in many cases, that's how a lot of people feel. And a lot of people were made to look like enemies if their religious values did not support the new sexual values and things like that, which do go against, in many cases, traditional religion. Again, just because your values don't support something doesn't mean you hate somebody. And I think that's one of the things we need to remember as a country and as a people. Just because you disagree with somebody does not mean you hate them. Just because I have values that say, okay, I don't want that for myself, I think it's immoral, doesn't mean I hate the person who's doing it. And I think this discrepancy between tolerance and force, as you know we're discussing here, needs to be made more clear. I think tolerance is necessary to have a country like ours where you have we are a diverse country, diverse religions, diverse beliefs, diverse political opinions, diverse races, diverse cultures. We should tolerate each other. That does not mean that you have to conform to everybody else or what the masses want. You can be yourself still, right? That's the strength of the individual, and something I believe that America does represent is the rights and protections on the individual. Again, freedom also depends on you respecting the freedom of others. Personally, I believe this, right? John Elizondo, you're saying, what do you think Trump will do about the United Nations? Good question. Well, we saw some examples of what Trump will do about the United Nations. Trump did begin, first of all, pulling the United States out of several branches of the United Nations. The World Health Organization, for example. Biden brought us back into it. There's now pressure around things like UNRWA, the United Nations branch in charge of Palestine, which, again, many members of UNRWA have been accused, at least, of being terrorists and being involved in the October 7th attacks on Israel. It is possible Trump could pull out of that. Israel has done it already. It's also very possible that Trump could maybe threaten to pull out of several UN branches that seem to now represent the opposite of what they're supposed to stand for. The United Nations Human Rights Commission, which, China, Iran, Russia, North Korea, some of the worst human rights abusers on the planet, some of these countries have major voices in these, to the extent that they're using it in what many would frame as, political tools where they're trying to enforce the laws of their country onto other countries because they have controlling, stakes in these things. I do think Trump will push back very strongly against the United Nations. And his argument for that is that we don't really need it. We don't need the United Nations, absolutely not. We pay a lot of money to it. Frankly, if the U.S. pulls out its support and its money, what's it going to be? It's going to be like the BRICS system, The other argument for that, though, is that the United Nations actually does have a lot of influence in Latin America. It has a lot of influence in a lot of third world countries, throughout Africa, throughout different Asian regions. Outside of the U.S., the United Nations actually does have a lot of power. And the argument is if the U.S. pulls totally out of it, we might hand control of it to America's enemies, like the Chinese Communist Party. And so we'll see how he deals with it. I do think Trump will approach it not in one extreme or the other. I think Trump will approach it where maybe he pulls out of certain parts of it, maintains certain parts, and uses the threat of pulling out American support in order to reform certain parts of it. But we will see, right? Let's see. Candace Harden, you're saying, it's going to be a really awkward thing to have the VP, Vice President, accept the Electoral College votes on January 6th. It is going to be awkward because Vice President Kamala Harris is the one who's going to have to do it, and Vice President Kamala Harris was also the one running against Trump. You're going to have the person who just lost the election have to affirm Trump as the president in the election she lost. Now, again, some people would point back to January 6th in 2020 when the tables were turned, and you had, of course, Vice President Mike Pence counting it, and Trump was accused of pressuring Pence to, change the vote, basically, count the dueling electors or send it to Congress, right? That did not happen. Pence said he did not have the legal ability to do that. Then afterwards, they changed the laws to make it so the vice president cannot do that, meaning Vice President Kamala Harris cannot legally do that unless they change the law between now and then. And personally, I don't know where Biden stands in this. I don't think he would do it, frankly. Some people noted that Jill Biden was wearing a red dress last night, just saying. And some people believe there's a bit of political infighting. You take it for what you will. A lot of left-wing media have been saying that. I don't actually know, it's just rumors. But take it for what you will. Vicky, you're saying, can't we just bawl ourselves out by declaring bankruptcy and start over? Some people have suggested we do that. Some people suggest that America declaring bankruptcy on our massive debt would actually be the most effective and best thing we could do. Others would argue that while it might be good for America itself, it could be bad globally because of what the US dollar represents. And because the US dollar is the world reserve currency is facing threats from new rising currencies. China, Russia, and other countries are now trying to create a BRICS currency, for example, which they just announced. That being said, maybe once that battle for the world is over, they'll do it. I don't know. Despite the US debt, despite everything else, the US dollar is still the strongest in the world, still the most stable in the world. And if we did declare bankruptcy, it would probably cause, I think it would devalue the dollar technically. But again, it would be good for America internally. The question is internationally, whether that be a good move right now when you have countries trying to overturn the US dollar as the reserve currency. So we'll see, right? Maybe there's other options on the table, but I think even just reducing the debt would be a big deal at this point. All right, Alfred's mom, you're saying our founding fathers were benevolent people, and I believe they were. They were also people of diverse religious interpretation. Yes, it's true most of them were Protestants, but There's different branches of Protestantism, and a lot of them did not see eye to eye. Remember that among religions, Protestants were persecuted by Catholics. When it came to the Pilgrims were in opposition to the Anglican Church, right, the Church of England. The Puritans were in support of the Church of England. There were a lot of disagreements on religion at that time. And so a lot of them actually had a lot of disagreements, actually. But they managed to come together and create a country which I believe was founded on the principles of religious freedom. America really protected these things. And a lot of the protections on the individual in the Bill of Rights were framed because these people, the Founding Fathers, had experienced a lot of persecution back in Europe and from Europe, and understood what could happen if one group was able to have power over another. And so the Bill of Rights did something incredible. It protected the greatest minority on earth. And do you know what that is? The greatest minority on earth is you. You as an individual are the greatest minority on earth because there is only one of you. Every single person is a minority in that sense. Every individual is unique, and every individual has a life that should be valued. And that is the basis of Americans' protections on individual rights. Not mob rule, not group rule, not for one belief or one culture or whatever else. The Bill of Rights protecting the rights of the individual. And the interpretation that government is formed among men to protect God-given rights. That the rights of the individual are given by God, and government exists to protect those rights. And it's incredible stuff if you really get into the history of, the background of how they came up with these principles. It's incredible stuff. I love this history, actually. Let's see, DK Solstice, will you be the new White House press secretary, if asked? I don't know if I would. Maybe I would. I don't think they'd ever ask me. I kind of feel like a political job right now would be one of the more difficult jobs to possibly have. But if they asked me, I would consider it. Let's put it that way. We'll see who he does end up flagging. But it's going to be interesting as Trump chooses his cabinet. Actually, on that note, it's going to be a big difference this time too. 2016, Trump was criticized for not bringing in his own team and having his own cabinet. That was one of his mistakes, actually, and debatable how you look at it. Trump did not replace a lot of officials that he could have replaced. He's also coming in now with the legal ability to remove a lot of permanent bureaucrats, what people would call the deep state or the permanent bureaucracy, or whatever you want to call it. People who typically cannot be fired by the president. Trump created a legal pathway to fire them. And you could actually see Trump come in and not only get rid of a lot of people, firing them, they're saying like 40, 50,000, if you go by like Project 2025 or whatever. Trump claims he never read it. Maybe he will implement parts of it if it's proposed to him in terms of policy and not part of that package, who knows. But I do think he learned a lot from last time. I do think he saw last time that most people he did not replace or he trusted ended up turning on him. And I think he's coming in with a very different view of politics than he did back in 2016, where he tended to trust a lot of people and a lot of people turned on him. I do think Trump is coming in with that knowledge now that the country unfortunately does have really strong political divides that make it more difficult to just leave people in office who can challenge you from within. I do think it's going to be interesting as it goes forward. Omega Sparrow, you're saying books to recommend about communist agenda. I highly recommend the Epoch Times published an editorial series called The Specter of Communism is Ruling Our World. I believe that it is the most comprehensive and talks also about the religious elements of communism, which communism is technically not an economic theory. It's more like a religion. It's more of a belief, like a religious belief or a set of values. The only reason we debate communism on the grounds of economy was because prior to Marx, the communists, and they existed prior to Marx, the communists were, basically they were losing the debate on economics and sociology, which they used to call praxeology. And what Marx did, because communists couldn't win the economic or sociology debate, what Marx did was basically said that the economists and so on, that they're the bourgeois intellectuals and you don't have to listen to them. And so the debate ended on that. But the economic debate was the winning debate, and so that remained as one of the key areas we were debating it on. Before that, communism was viewed as more of a religion. It was more on that level. And again, if you read the Spectre series from the Epoch Times called The Spectre of Communism is Ruling Our World, it talks about it more on that level, on a value system and the challenges we've had with that. A fantastic book, actually. All right, folks, that said, thank you so much for being here. We'll see what happens with Trump's win. Donald J. Trump is now both the 45th president of the United States and the 47th president of the United States. He is the president-elect. Again, it's possible we could still see legal challenges or recounts or other things. The Trump team was the one set up to make more of those challenges. The Democrats were more planning to push back against the Republican challenges. So it's not quite clear how the Democrats will respond to this. It was also a pretty big landslide, meaning enough states flipped to Trump where it'd be very hard for Democrats to flip it back. We'll see how things go with the remaining swing states. Even without them, Trump is projected to be pretty strong in the lead. But Trump is projected to win all the swing states, every one of them. And overturning even one would be difficult for anybody, let alone when it's like this. And so we will see. This is a major shakeup in our political system. This is a huge, monumental shakeup. And it is possible Trump could come in with not just a supermajority, having both chambers of Congress, but also having the Supreme Court probably on his side too. And we'll see what happens over the next 4 years. But if one more person steps down from the Supreme Court, Trump could appoint another Supreme Court justice. This is monumental, folks. This is a massive shift for this country. And again, we'll see how it goes going forward. That said, over the next few months, we'll find out. So leading up to the inauguration on January 20th, we will see what happens. And folks, that said, join me back here. I'm here with y'all the whole way through. So come back again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And we're not going anywhere, so you don't worry. 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, I'll see you tomorrow. And folks, as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.